Hey guys, tonight we sink into satin and jade, silver-threaded mystery, and enough beaded embroidery to lull even the most fashion-phobic history buff to sleep. We're slipping quietly through the polished corridors of the Qing Imperial Palace, under the velvety hush of candlelight, where the silks rustle and the perfume hangs heavy, like a nap draped in rose oil and powdered amber. Empress Dowager Cixi is getting dressed. Again, you'll soon discover that getting dressed for her was not so much a task as a full-time political art form. You know the type. Changes outfits 3 times before tea, and every accessory might trigger a foreign incident or an affair. Don't worry, you probably won't survive this week-long schedule. But that's sort of the point. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is. I love hearing about sleepy listeners all over the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up, it's Monday morning in 19th century Beijing, and you're already late. Not for anything particularly urgent. Just a casual imperial inspection of the koi pond, and maybe a quiet berating of the Minister of Revenue. Typical Empress Dowager stuff. Before you can do any of that, though, you must survive your first outfit of the week. It begins with underlayers, soft silk tunics in pale persimmon and sky-tinged jade, stitched with quiet clouds along the hem. You can almost feel how cool they are against the skin, smoother than a fresh mooncake, and twice as pricey. Next comes the robe itself. Monday morning robes must strike the precise balance between I am rested and do not mistake my leisure for weakness. This one's embroidered with delicate cranes, symbols of longevity, because why not start the week reminding everyone you're not going anywhere? The cranes are silver-threaded, and some say they glint with cursed accuracy when the sunlight hits them just so. A court attendant once tripped over his own shoes staring too hard at the birds on her sleeve. He was reassigned to melon peeling. Around your waist, a sash of deep plum, knotted in a way that signals you're not receiving officials, but also not receiving them, should they bring something shiny. It's a political gray zone, wrapped in brocade. Now, footwear. You slide into platform slippers, just a few inches high enough to be stylish, low enough not to require actual balance. They're embroidered with lotuses, which historians still argue whether Cixi chose for their symbolism or simply because they matched her footstool. The real showstopper, though, is the hair, a towering coiffure, lacquered and pinned like a miniature sculpture garden. The centerpiece is a single hairpin tipped with jade and white enamel petals. Gifted, rumor has it, by a terrified Portuguese ambassador who once sneezed in her presence. You think she forgave him, or at least let him keep his nose. On Mondays, her earrings are never rubies, only pearls. Small ones, barely the size of a teardrop, because they hint at modesty. An absurd concept when you're literally controlling an empire from behind a silkscreen. But hey, symbolism counts. Fringe falls over your forehead like a curtain trained apart just so. You've heard tell that she once delayed a morning meeting for 3 full hours because a bead sat half an inch too low. The hairdresser involved was never seen again. Maybe he's still in Forbidden City somewhere, sewing beads onto ghost robes. As you finally rise, draped in all your Monday splendor, a pair of eunuchs bow and open the lacquered doors to your private courtyard. It smells faintly of sandalwood and chrysanthemums. One bird chirps. Another flees dramatically into the air, as if it, too, is late for a meeting. You glide past a low marble bench where a scroll awaits you, some minister's lengthy plea for more horses, or fewer taxes. You're not really paying attention. It's Monday. No one expects miracles yet. Instead, you consider whether to swap your outer robe before tea. The plum sash, though bold, might be a touch confrontational if paired with this morning's porridge. Historians still argue whether Cixi truly picked out her own color combinations or whether a team of court stylists. Yes, that was a real thing, merely predicted her taste with uncanny skill. Either way, she was never seen in the same robe twice in 1 week. And each piece had its own title, like Orchid Dawn at Mirror Lake, or Peach Blossom Echoes of Frost. Today's robe is informally referred to as cranes gently scorn the ministers. You like it already. Before breakfast, you'll sit at a low lacquered table and sip warm water from a jade cup. Because starting your day with tea is simply too basic. You nibble on a sticky rice dumpling filled with red bean and judgment. Somewhere in a garden, a servant is trimming bonsai trees while whispering gossip about yesterday's scandal in the embroidery wing. The sleeves of your robe, by the way, are absurdly long. On purpose. They're perfect for dramatic flourishes, dismissive waves, and accidental soup dipping. There's an old story that Cixi once had a favorite robe rehemmed because the sleeves weren't wide enough to conceal a small scroll and a mildly treacherous smirk. By the time noon slides lazily across the stone tiles, you've changed twice. Once into a shorter robe for a walk among the peonies, and once because a visiting cousin said your first robe made you look unseasonably formal. She has not been invited back. And as you recline under a sheer silk canopy, letting one embroidered sleeve dangle artistically over the armrest, you reflect on the fact that, yes, you spent most of your Monday just getting dressed. That was the point. Clothing wasn't clothing. It was the unspoken language of power, of elegance, of making every silk thread work overtime to remind people, I rule from behind screen, sure, but I see everything. You sigh. Time to think about your evening look. Tuesday begins not with sunrise, but with the sound of bells, tiny porcelain ones, chiming in a polite yet unmistakable way from outside your chamber. You blink against embroidered pillowcases and squint at the shadow of your personal attendant bowing in slow motion. She's holding a lacquered tray with today's outfit sketch. Yes, sketch, because of course, your Tuesday look is already a collaborative effort. The robe is a misty lavender today, touched with the faintest silver accents along the sleeve hems, styled in a wave motif that says serenity, but not retirement. Retirement is for ministers who cough too often, not for Empress Dowagers who still hold meetings from behind silk curtains and can demote a governor with a raised eyebrow. You yawn and stretch one perfectly waxed brow, already imagining how the hairpiece will make your head ache by mid-morning. It's fine. Pain is just another accessory. You learn that from your shoes. The underlayers, again, are of utmost importance. Today it's cloud gray, silk gauze with little stitch bats fluttering near the collar. You were told bats mean good luck, or longevity, or maybe both. Historians still argue whether the motif was chosen for cultural symbolism or simply because the court tailor had a backlog of bat patterns and needed to unload them. You step into morning with the robe hanging loose on your shoulders while two assistants tighten the sash, a smoky amethyst brocade laced with gold so fine it was once mistaken for imported thread from Persia. A scandal erupted. Turns out it wasn't Persian. It was better. Your slippers today are more ornamental than functional. Light violet with toe tips, so curled they resemble lotus buds. Walking in them is optional, gliding preferred. One of your attendants offers an arm like a railing. You ignore it and move like a drifting incense trail through the morning fog. Out in the courtyard, a small commotion. A visiting noble's pet monkey has escaped again and is attempting to hide behind a rock carved in the shape of a peach. You consider whether to intervene, but it's Tuesday. You don't do monkeys on Tuesdays. Instead, you recline at your painted screen while ministers read reports in subdued tones. Today's outfit, with its whispering sleeves and peaceful color scheme, tells them you are receptive, but not to everything, only to wisdom, flattery, and possibly poems. You're handed a delicate hair ornament shaped like a phoenix mid-flight, enamel wings spread as though it too might glide out the window. It jingles slightly when you move your head, a musical warning to all in earshot. Yes, she's listening. Your hair is parted perfectly down the middle and swept into two arcs shaped like crescent moons, a style only achieved through pins, patience, and at least one assistant holding their breath. There's a whispered legend that one of your hairstylists once sneezed mid-coif and had to pretend it was an artistic choice. You let her stay. The look caught on. A short debate breaks out among ministers over whether new taxes should be levied on fishing villages. You fan yourself with a leaf-shaped silk fan embroidered with chrysanthemums. The motion is slow, deliberate, and filled with subtle irritation. The fan makes more of a statement than words ever could. You're offered a snack. pickled plums wrapped in lotus petals. You eat one. It's too tart. You pretend you like it anyway because the chef is watching from behind a screen, and you're merciful. For now, somewhere around the second scroll, you change your earrings. Pearls out, tourmalines in. Because now the light has shifted, and if you're going to be vaguely annoyed for 2 hours, your jewelry should at least reflect the appropriate hue of that mood. Tourmalines were once believed to change color based on your emotional state. Historians still argue whether you wore them for their symbolism or just enjoyed watching people panic as they tried to interpret your tone based on your earlobes. You step out for a walk in the side garden, one long path, carved stones beneath your slippers, and wind chimes that tinkle in the breeze like anxious courtiers. The koi glance up at you, unimpressed. You consider changing into your tea robe. It's still lavender, but shorter, more fitted, and features little applique frogs climbing along the hemline. Some believe this was Cixi's nod to fertility goddesses. Others say she just liked frogs. Either way, the hemline is fantastic. Back inside, the light changes again. Afternoon creeps over the rooftops, and you shed the tea robe in favor of an indoor jacket. Midnight blue with tiny stitched waves crashing along the cuffs. Power sleeves, for when you must listen intently to court poets reading you 5 pages of metaphors about plum blossoms and loyalty. You nod politely while secretly wondering how long you can maintain this facial expression. You're wearing a robe that costs more than most ministers' homes, and the poet rhymed jade with fade. Twice. To end the day, you change one final time. The evening robe, technically still in the lavender family, but now darkened to lilac with a shimmering dragon stitched in platinum thread across the back. It's visible only when the light hits you from behind, and only if you're walking away, which, to be clear, you always do at the most dramatic moment. Evening calls for an accessory upgrade. A headpiece with twin phoenixes, wings outstretched, each clutching a pearl in its beak. You're told it weighs nearly 3 pounds. You smile. That's barely more than your dinner. Dinner itself is taken quietly behind screens. 3 courses, a taste of bird's nest soup, steamed duck in lotus leaf, and rice porridge flavored with candied kumquat. You eat sparingly, not out of restraint, but because the robe demands posture. Later, you sip rose petal tea while attendants gently unpin your hair. The phoenix hairpiece goes back into its velvet-lined box, guarded by 2 eunuchs and a very suspicious cat who's been watching all day. You lie down on brocade sheets, limbs sinking into the soft folds, knowing tomorrow will bring another robe, another political color palette, another chance to make the court nervous with a shift of fabric. And yet, here in this quiet moment, under the amber glow of a single lantern, you're just a woman in lavender, exhausted from another triumphant day of strategic fashion. Wednesday does not knock politely. It crashes in like a dragon looking for its breakfast. You wake to the sound of lacquered doors sliding open and 3 attendants whispering about today's sleeves. Not the color, the sleeves. Their length has apparently caused a stir in the outer corridors. You blink. Still somewhere between a dream and the realization that fashion in the Forbidden City is a form of foreign policy. Today's ensemble is a golden ochre robe, warm and regal, the color of marigolds after rain. The fabric, a gauzy satin, so fine it might dissolve if you breathe too hard on it. Naturally, the sleeves are excessive. They pool on the ground like a puddle of royal authority. One official was once reprimanded for accidentally stepping on them. You didn't speak. You just looked at him, then the sleeve, and back at him again. He asked to be transferred to the outer provinces. Far outer. Underneath, there's a rich crimson underrobe stitched with tiny fish. Symbols of abundance, or luck, or maybe just a quiet reminder that you prefer your metaphors edible. Historians still argue whether the fish motif indicated imperial favor for agrarian stability, or was simply a visual pun lost to time. Your headdress today is even more theatrical than usual. Gold mesh studded with red coral clusters and tiny seed pearls, balanced so precisely that you feel like a weather vane in human form. There's a miniature pagoda resting just above your left ear. You tilt slightly to compensate. As you rise, your attendants rearrange the folds of the robe like stagehands preparing a curtain. The wind outside whistles, stirring the bamboo, and you consider how well the ochre contrasts with the gray skies. You smile. This outfit was clearly the right choice. At breakfast, you're offered sweet rice cakes shaped like chrysanthemums. You nibble one and pretend not to notice the chef watching nervously from a crack in the doorway. You pause, then nod slowly. He exhales in relief loud enough to be heard across the courtyard. You sit for a scroll reading. It's Wednesday, which means updates from provinces. Someone in Shandong tried to counterfeit official seals again. You lift your fan, jade green today, with plum blossoms embroidered in pink silk, and flutter it slowly in front of your face. Your ministers know what it means. How boring. How predictable. They scramble to make the story more interesting. The forger was using beet juice. Now that's new. You raise one brow. Historians still argue whether you truly found these updates tedious, or if you used boredom as a power move. A 3-hour meeting followed by abrupt silence does tend to shift the political atmosphere. Mid-morning, you change. Not the robe. No, that stays. But you swap your earrings. Today's pair are shaped like tiny gourds, carved from translucent jadeite. A fringe choice, really. Gourds are traditionally humble. But that's the point. You're so powerful. You can afford to wear symbols of modesty. Then it's time to host the visiting silk merchants. You don't greet them with words. You simply enter the chamber, your golden sleeves dragging slightly behind you, and let the silence stretch long enough to turn everyone's posture into origami. Finally, you speak. Show me something softer than this. You gesture to your sleeve. They panic, but in a very respectful way. Someone presents a bolt of fabric that looks like melted snow. You touch it. You nod. You allow a smile. Somewhere, a merchant faints from pride. As the sun climbs, your shoes become a problem. Today, they're more like miniature platforms, raising you nearly 3 inches off the ground. There's embroidery along the sides, dragons chasing pearls. You don't walk so much as hover. At one point, a step down the stairs requires 2 attendants and 1 prayer. You change again for tea, this time into an indoor jacket with sunset orange lotus blossoms blooming across the shoulders. You sit on a low divan, sipping chrysanthemum tea and pretending not to listen as 2 young eunuchs gossip in the hallway about your outfit. One says it makes you look like a goddess. The other agrees. You allow the conversation to continue because, frankly, it's accurate. In the afternoon, your niece visits. She arrives in sky blue. A bold move. You say nothing but make a mental note to wear a superior blue tomorrow. You guide her through your garden, your golden robe gleaming in the filtered light. She comments on the koi. You comment on the fact that the blue ones are hiding today. She understands your meaning. Later, you hold a private audience behind a semi-transparent screen. The silhouette of your robe, backlit by lanterns, becomes part of performance. Your outline moves like a shadow puppet. One minister stammers his entire report while trying not to stare at the pattern on your sleeve, which, thanks to the lighting, now looks like flames licking upward. Evening approaches. Dinner is roasted quail with ginger sauce and a clear soup filled with lotus seeds. You eat slowly. Today's robe doesn't allow for quick chewing. Plus, you're busy listening to a performance of the zither, a gentle tune about plum blossoms falling on a scholar's scroll. You wonder how many scrolls have actually suffered this fate. Probably fewer than poems suggest. Night descends. Your sleeves are now so familiar that you forget how heavy they are until 2 maids help lift them as you walk toward your sleeping quarters. You remove the headdress first, then the earrings, then the robe, folded with the care of a holy relic. In a soft linen nightrobe, pale cream with 1 discreet gold phoenix stitched along the collar. You sit for a final tea. Tonight it's jasmine. You sip, watching the lanterns flicker against the far wall, shadows dancing like gossip on paper. You lie back into a nest of brocade and sigh. Another day of diplomacy conducted via color, embroidery, and strategic accessorizing. You don't just wear power. You choreograph it. Thursday wakes up dramatic. You're not even out of bed before someone bursts in whisper yelling that the yellow robe was accidentally steamed too long and now smells faintly of pickled plum. You sigh without opening your eyes. Not because you care particularly, but because the pickled plum scent might clash with today's planned incense. These are the real problems of state. Your attendants scurry around like silk-clad squirrels. One suggests changing the color palette entirely. Another offers to air it out over sandalwood. The robe in question is a deep imperial yellow, reserved strictly for you, and embroidered with coiling dragons so detailed they seem to twitch when the light hits them. There are rubies sewn into the claws. Not stitched, sewn. You once joked that the robe weighed as much as a small dog. No one laughed, but one court tailor did faint. You eventually agree to swap it for the backup robe. This one's a rich lavender shade with silver cranes in mid-flight across the hemline. The cranes are positioned so they appear to lift off as you walk. It's subtle showmanship. You love subtle showmanship. Today's main event is an audience with the Jesuit envoy. He's brought gifts, clocks, telescopes, and a strange map where China is not centered. You don't comment on that, but you do raise your fan. Today's is shaped like a teardrop and painted with an ink wash peony. And give a slow flick. Everyone understands that to mean, let's circle back to that later. The robe was a good choice. The envoy can't stop glancing at the cranes. Someone murmurs that he asked if they represented your soul taking flight. You smile politely. Historians still argue whether the Empress Dowager used symbolic clothing intentionally, or whether the symbolism was retrospectively applied by panicking courtiers desperate to make sense of your fashion calendar. Mid-morning tea is served in an outer pavilion, draped with gauze to keep out the sun, and, more importantly, the gossip. You recline just enough to look effortless, but not enough to wrinkle the robe. A small dog, your favorite Pekingese, today sporting a tiny ribbon matching your sleeves, jumps onto your lap. You whisper that it's now the best-dressed creature in the empire. It yawns in reply. After tea, a chamberlain reads aloud the contents of a petition from a village in the southwest complaining about overly aggressive geese. You tilt your head. Is this your problem? Apparently it is. You nod once. More foxes. You say simply and sip your chrysanthemum tea. No one questions the logic. You walk the southern corridor at noon. The polished floors reflect your lavender hem like a watercolor. Guards bow. Eunuchs scurry. The sunlight hits the silver cranes just right, and for a moment, you look like you're gliding, which, if we're being honest, you sort of are. Someone presents a new lipstick pigment, derived, allegedly, from crushed beetles. You raise a brow. That seems committed. You test it on a fingertip, and decide it's too bold for Thursday. Maybe next week. Historians still argue whether your cosmetic choices influence court fashion or were simply your quiet rebellion against boredom. Probably both. Luncheon is a display. Pickled lotus roots arranged into floral shapes. A soup that tastes like secrets, and rice so fluffy you suspect clouds were harmed in its making. You compliment the chef by finishing exactly half your bowl. They'll frame the spoon you used. Afternoon brings robe number 2. The lavender is folded and replaced by a seafoam green creation with tiny embroidered turtles. Yes, turtles. Not because they're regal, but because they're patient, old, and hard to assassinate. You like that in a symbol. You host a grand secretary under a peach tree. He brings bad news about a flooded canal and good news about an abundant mulberry crop. You listen with half your attention. The other half is focused on whether the hemline turtles appear to be swimming as your foot shifts. They do. Excellent. You interrupt a minister's report mid-sentence to ask if peach blossoms mean longevity or love. He panics. Both, he squeaks. You nod, satisfied. Historians still argue whether you ask these questions to test knowledge or just to break up the monotony. Honestly, both again. Evening arrives too fast. The final change of the day is ceremonial. A dark sapphire robe with tiny embroidered stars, each one slightly raised so that when you walk beneath candlelight, they sparkle like a constellation of your choosing. This is your, I'm not tired, but I want you to leave robe. It's extremely effective. You attend a musical performance, a slow Guccine piece based on the migration of cranes. You nod along gently, fingers drumming on the lacquered armrest. At one point, a string breaks mid-song. The court holds its breath. You pause and clap. Just once. The musician exhales. Everyone else follows suit. Your night tea is served in porcelain, so thin it trembles in your hand. You sip osmanthus-infused water while a maid brushes out your hair, each stroke slow and reverent, as if untangling history itself. The lavender robe is returned, pressed and aired. It no longer smells of pickled plum. You request it for next Thursday, paired with the beetle lipstick. Bold, royal, slightly alarming. Perfect. You lie in bed under gauzy nets and breathe in sandalwood smoke curling like calligraphy into the rafters. Another day, another narrative spun from silk and symbolism. You fall asleep wondering how many Jesuit maps you need to lose before China ends up centered again. As Thursday slinks quietly into the palace's airy corridors, you shuffle into the day with a growing suspicion that there are no more surprises left. But Empress Dowager Cixi, fashion maestro and imperial illusionist, hasn't run out of ideas just yet. Today, she leans toward maximalism, not the shouty, glitter-splosion kind, but regal crescendo of layers, textures, and meticulous symbolism, all stitched together with the grace of a tiger napping in the sun. Also, side note, your calves are sore from all this imaginary walking in brocade slippers. You begin in her private quarters. The inner sanctum smells faintly of orchid root, aged parchment, and lacquered wood. Cixi is already halfway into her transformation, her attendants fluttering around like brightly colored moths. The Empress raises a delicate wrist. Today's starting point. It's wrapped in a gauzy, gold-threaded sleeve from the underrobe, which she calls her comfort silk. And it does look comforting, in the way that marshmallow clouds probably feel. If marshmallow clouds cost more than a medium-sized boat. The underrobe is seafoam green with curling lotus tendrils embroidered in pale ivory, a motif apparently reserved for moments of quiet power. Historians still argue whether the specific lotus style signaled diplomacy, divine approval, or simply a good mood. Then again, lotus patterns were like the mood rings of the Qin court. Interpret at your own risk. Next comes the outer robe, and here's where things go from pretty to properly opulent. A deep, inky blue robe is unfurled. This one's practically a mural. There are 9 five-clawed dragons dancing across it, which might sound aggressive, but one of them appears to be juggling a peach. Very intimidating. Each dragon is ringed with clouds and mountain peaks, symbols tied to the Emperor's dominion over both heaven and earth. And yet, here they are, swirling around a woman who technically never took the throne herself. Cixi was never officially Empress Regnant, but she might as well have been, given how often celestial embroidery deferred to her. There's one unusual detail today. An asymmetrical sash made from crimson silk, edged with surprisingly minimalist pattern of white cranes. Fringe scholars, yes, those exist, debate whether this was inspired by Taoist immortality myths, or if it's simply coordinated with the slippers, which, by the way, are bright tangerine and covered in gold-threaded bats. Because why not? Now, the hairstyle is slightly more restrained today. No towering phoenix wings or feathery garden trellises, but a traditional tulip chignon, tightly wound, secured with long golden pins tipped with coral blossoms. It's one of her less attention-demanding looks, which of course means it would still get you mistaken for an entire parade float in most parts of the world. Nestled behind one ear, a single fresh peony bud nods gently with each movement. And if you're wondering where on earth they kept fresh peonies ready in every season, there were special temperature-controlled garden beds. Because of course there were. Makeup today is cooler in tone. Powdered rice base, blue-black eyeliner drawn into gentle swoops, and subtle blush tinted with crushed pomegranate seeds. Her lips are that same lacquer red from earlier in the week, but this time painted only in the center, like a cherry blossom at the very first bloom. It's the kind of makeup that looks effortless, which in historical fashion usually means someone worked for 6 hours and burned incense to get it right. As for jewelry, there's restraint, at least relatively speaking. A 3-tiered jade necklace rests just above the collarbone, beads alternating between soft green and translucent white. The earrings are old favorites, dangling pearls the size of small plums, one of which was rumored to have belonged to a deposed rival. Gossip or not, it hangs heavy with unspoken messages. By the afternoon, there's a change in scenery, and thus a change in wardrobe. The Empress will appear briefly at a ceremonial tea with visiting diplomats. For this, She selects what court scribes once described as her storm and sunrise ensemble. That's not a metaphor. It's a charcoal gray overcoat layered with panels of glowing copper embroidery that actually shimmer like dawn over misty hills. You can practically hear the flute music. Her hair is dressed back up, now with 2 beaded combs studded with blue kingfisher feathers, a practice that makes modern bird lovers wince, but at the time was considered the height of sophistication. Historians still argue whether these feathers were collected sustainably or came with a hefty karmic debt. The Qing certainly didn't keep receipts. By early evening, the tea is long over, and Empress Dowager Cixi reappears at a private poetry reading in yet another garment. This one, soft dove gray, embroidered with chrysanthemum vines and the occasional phoenix feather. The pattern is subtle enough to be mistaken for a watercolor painting, and it's paired with what might be the single coziest-looking cloak in palace history, lined with rabbit fur and scented faintly with sandalwood. When she moves, the hem makes no sound, just soft whispers of silk against polished stone. It's during this last outfit change that you notice something odd. All the attendants are stepping a little more lightly. One even suppresses a sneeze. And then it hits you. Today's robes aren't just symbolic or stately. They're designed for silence. Perhaps this evening's poetry is more than an artistic affair. Maybe something's being negotiated in the spaces between the lines. Or maybe she's just had enough noise this week. Remember those tangerine slippers with the bats? She's wearing them again, a sign of good fortune. Or perhaps an inside joke. Historians still argue whether that particular motif meant 10,000 blessings, or I dare you to say something. Either way, the look works. The Empress glides through shadowed corridors with the poise of someone who's won every chess game before the board was even set. And you, somewhere behind her in this sleepy thought dream, start to feel the soft lull of brocade on your mind. Friday dawns in a misty, perfumed hush. You've come this far. 5 days, at least 25 layers of silk, 3 types of phoenixes, and more embroidery than your modern brain can process. And still, somehow, Empress Dowager Cixi finds a way to surprise you. This morning's wardrobe begins with nothing. Okay, not literally nothing. Let's stay tasteful. But Cixi, ruler of detail and orchestrator whispers, starts the day in a minimalistic robe. Light lavender, barely patterned, so airy it seems woven from fog. It drapes her like a sigh. After days of complexity, it's jarring in its simplicity. You're half expecting a secret headdress tucked in her sleeve or embroidered riddles on the inner hem. But no, just soft, bare elegance. The robe is what court seamstresses call cloud silk, a fabric so fine it was said to disintegrate in rain. Whether that's true or not, no one's risking it today. Cixi steps lightly, her slippers almost blending into the floor. This, apparently, is her meditation ensemble. And yes, even Empress Dowagers meditate, though probably not on their inbox or unpaid electric bills. She's likely contemplating dynastic fate, with a relative alignment of heavenly constellations, or maybe just how much jasmine to steep for breakfast. Historians still argue whether her morning silences were spiritual rituals or deliberate power plays, a moment to remind everyone that absolute rulers don't have to talk unless they want to. Either way, the lavender robe floats to the garden like a ghost with perfect posture. After breakfast, which includes preserved plums, pine nut porridge, and exactly 1 perfectly peeled lychee, things pick up. The simplicity is shed like a veil. Friday's main outfit arrives like a musical crescendo in silk, a high-collar robe of shimmering teal, with phoenixes in flight stitched in crimson and silver thread. Their wings, as you may have guessed, are made from that same ethically questionable kingfisher feather mosaic. You're no expert, but it's hard to deny. It glows like electricity trapped in fabric. The theme today is diplomacy. A foreign envoy is expected, and the outfit reflects it. Gold trim lines the cuffs, hinting at imperial generosity, while the robe's inner lining bears floral scrollwork thought to symbolize the peony's long friendship with the Chinese court. One floral historian claims the design came from an earlier Ming-era sketchbook, while another insists it's Qing innovation. They're probably both right, and both shouting over tea somewhere. The headpiece is no small thing today. A sweeping black lacquer wing comb arch from temple to temple, affixed with dangling pearls, and red jade drops that tinkle when she nods. It looks heavy, and it is an entire assistant is assigned to stand by with discreet pillow in case she wants to rest her neck mid-meeting. That's not a joke. You can almost hear the soft flump of the pillow being readied. Her hair is woven with dark purple silk cords and adorned with twin gold cicadas, symbolizing rebirth, but also slightly creepy. There's also a pin shaped like a tiny scroll, which scholars argue might represent her mastery of bureaucratic knowledge or might have just been trendy that month. For jewelry, today's centerpiece is a brooch shaped like a fan, carved from nephrite jade and set with a single large amber bead. It glows faintly in the afternoon sun, as if it contains a drop of old fire. The symbolism is layered. The fan for control of court tempers, the amber for wisdom drawn from ancient trees. But who knows? Maybe she just liked the way it caught the light. Makeup returns to bold tones for the occasion. Her eyebrows are shaped into soft arcs, high on the brow bone, signaling watchfulness. The lip color is the same fire red lacquer, but overlaid today with a glaze of crushed cinnabar. One advisor whispers that the color intimidates nervous negotiators. Another claims it was simply her favorite shade because it made her teeth look whiter. Both are probably true. By midday, the Empress has changed again, this time into a ceremonial dress known simply as the river gown. And wow, if that sounds dramatic, it's because it is. The base color is a deep aquamarine, almost black in low light, and embroidered from shoulder to hem with streaming waves, koi fish, and water lilies. You can't help but stare. It's hypnotic, like someone turned a koi pond into haute couture. And yes, it's heavy. So heavy, in fact, she only wears it when seated. There's a silk-covered dais for her to recline upon, surrounded by painted screens and an entire squad of fan-bearers. From the right angle, she looks like she's floating through a dream. The symbolism is rich here. Water as the lifeblood of the empire, the Empress as its source and channel. Historians still argue whether the gown was worn to bless river-related construction projects or just to make a splash. Pun fully intended. Evening brings yet another change, less showy, more stately. A plum-color wrap robe with pale gold accents. The pattern is subtle. A repeated design of mandarin ducks circling a lotus pool. If you squint, you'll see the ducks are paired, swimming in quiet tandem, an image long associated with marital harmony. Except, of course, Cixi was a widow. This might have been a soft flex, a symbol of loyalty, or a cheeky reminder that she was doing just fine without an emperor. Thank you very much. The earrings tonight are something else. Tiny dangling jade gourds, paired with matching hairpins tipped in black pearls. You're informed, probably by a drowsy palace aide, that gourds represent longevity and prosperity. Also, they make an adorable clink when she turns her head. And the final accessory for the day, a fan. Not just any fan, though. This one's shaped like a butterfly wing, painted in mother of pearl and ivory, with a hidden compartment rumored to contain powdered mint or rose petals. Yes, a fan with a snack drawer. Why not? As you trail behind her, yawning politely, you realize Friday has been an emotional roller coaster of outfits, from airy calm to aquatic drama. Each layer, each stitch, a message, a whisper, a calculated wink to the world watching from behind ornate screens. And you're still here, still following the swish of silk through shadows, still wondering what she'll wear tomorrow. Saturday stirs in with lazy golden light creeping across lacquered floors, the sort that makes everything look a little dreamlike, even the responsibilities of an empress. And today, Empress Dowager Cixi indulges that dreamlike energy fully. Her outfit schedule slows just a fraction, like a sigh in fabric form. But don't worry, you're still about to witness more changes of clothing than most people experience in a full vacation abroad. The first ensemble of the day is all about morning comfort, though of course, comfort for a Qing imperial matriarch still involves a tightly coordinated robe, belt, and embroidered slippers. You shuffle into her private tea garden where she's already seated, sipping osmanthus tea in a soft moss green robe with plum blossom embroidery. The plum blossoms are tiny, exquisitely so, like they were sewn on by a squirrel with a magnifying glass. This is her contemplative wear, and you've learned by now that contemplative robes are always green or gray. Apparently, Those were considered non-ruling colors, suitable for moments of quiet thought and personal peace. The sleeves draped loosely, allowing her to flick a brush over a calligraphy scroll between sips. One historian suggests these early hours were when Cixi drafted her most personal thoughts. Another claims she just doodled fish cartoons when she was bored. The truth, as always, lies somewhere between scholarship and snack break. By mid-morning, it's back to business. You don't get to rule an empire through a regency council without a firm grip on court etiquette, and Cixi's midday outfit is an exercise in ceremonial precision. A mustard yellow robe with wide lapels and a stitched front panel depicting a pair of guardian lions. They stare at each other with round eyes mid-roar in what might be the oldest version of an office power pose. The robe's borders are lined in deep indigo, and around her neck she wears a choker of coral beads. The coral beads are a fun twist. Red coral was traditionally associated with rank, and while only men technically wore the official coral court beads, Cixi was, well, Cixi. The rules bent when she blinked. And the choker? Custom-made. The fringe features teardrop pearls and two tiny gold lotus pods hanging in the center, which dangle in perfect rhythm with her breath. Her headpiece at this point in the day is a study in balance, delicate enough to glide with her movements, but bold enough to say, "Yes, I did reorganize the inner court budget today. You're welcome." It's a lacquered black comb with a cluster of small flowers crafted from enamel and precious stones. The centerpiece? A cherry blossom made entirely of rose quartz petals and a central diamond, so small it could hide inside a buttonhole. Later, when a minor official presents tribute, bamboo scrolls and silk, Cixi's outfit shifts again. This time, she wears a twilight blue robe embroidered with starbursts. If you listen closely, you'll hear whispers around court. This was her celestial motif. She used it to signal distant vision, a focus beyond petty politics. The robe's lining is scarlet silk, which peeks out subtly with every step, a surprise flash of color in an otherwise somber palette. Now let's talk about sleeves. The ones on this robe? Enormous. You could probably hide 2 house cats in there, if palace rules allowed pets. The wide cuffs are stitched with curling silver threads in the shape of dragons biting their own tails. Eternal cycles and all that. And while we're on dragons, her earrings today are shaped like tiny golden ones, curling around freshwater pearls the size of peas. Historians still argue whether these dragon earrings were part of an official set or a quiet political jab at rival factions who question her legitimacy. Either way, they dangle with undeniable presence. They also reflect sunlight straight into your eye as you follow her, and you have to squint dramatically for the rest of the hour. By afternoon, she's back in something breezy. This is rare. Cixi didn't often appear in sheer layers during court hours, but Saturday afternoons, you've learned, have their own vibe. She appears in a robe of champagne silk, nearly translucent, with a pattern of cranes in flight stitched in white thread, so fine it's practically invisible unless you're close enough to count the stitches, which, thanks to your new role as Empress's imaginary stylist, you are. The cranes are mid-air, wings in varying stages of flapping. Some say this design was chosen as a meditation on movement and freedom. Others think it was just really hard to embroider, and therefore impressive. Also valid. Her shoes this afternoon are a standout. Elevated platform slippers with embroidered soles. Not embroidered tops. Soles. So every time she walks, the floor beneath her gets an ink-free imprint of silk artistry, like a royal rubber stamp with every step. The design? Tiny plum branches and clouds. Soft enough not to scratch the floor, but prominent enough to remind everyone who's gliding past. And then comes dinner, which means it's time for glam. The final outfit of the day is deep crimson, a color Cixi reserved for specific social occasions. It hugs the figure more closely, fastened with ornate frog closures shaped like blooming lotuses. The fabric is heavier than anything you've seen today, but somehow she wears it like it's spun air. The back panel of the robe features a dramatic scene, a phoenix rising from flames at the bottom hem, its wings stretching all the way up past her shoulders. The embroidery is done in copper and gold thread, with tiny mirrors stitched into the feathers to catch candlelight during the evening banquet. Yes, tiny mirrors. It turns her into a walking chandelier, and you don't know whether to admire it or shield your eyes. The headpiece for dinner is majestic, but not overbearing. 2 gold hairpins fan outward, each tipped with a jade bead carved into the shape of a pomegranate. A fertility symbol that also, frankly, just looks very chic. Between them, a small black lacquered comb is inset with silver filigree stars. When she tilts her head, the lights flicker across it like stars shifting in a pond. Tonight's final detail, a ring, unusual for her. A single emerald set in a filigree band worn on her right hand, said had been gifted by a Persian envoy years earlier. Some say she wore it only when feeling contemplative or defiant. You're not sure which is tonight, but she taps it twice on her wine cup before the meal begins. A soft click, a tiny ritual, the last glint of Saturday before Sunday sneaks in through the curtains. Sunday begins with a hush of cool air and the rustle of silk against polished floorboards. You've almost adjusted to the rhythm of this imperial life, the endless cycle of robes, hairpins, and ceremonies. But today, something's different. Empress Dowager Cixi is slower to rise. The palace is quieter. Even the birds seem to tiptoe. She starts the day in what palace staff call her stillness robe, a pale ivory garment with almost no embroidery. Almost. There's a single branch of bamboo stitched near the hem, barely visible unless she's sitting just right in the morning light. Bamboo, as you may recall, symbolizes resilience and calm. Or, if you've been in the palace long enough, it also doubles as, I'm not in the mood to be argued with. The robe flows freely, and for once her sleeves are tight to the arms. No cat's hiding in here. She wears no jewelry, no shoes, and no headdress. Just a black silk ribbon tying back her hair in a low knot. It's a look that says, I'm the Empress and I don't need sequins today. Thank you very much. She walks barefoot across the stone corridor to the Imperial Garden. The morning is cool, the stones are colder, and the fish in the pond all pause mid-swim, like even they don't want to interrupt her train of thought. The only real sound is the soft whip of her hem brushing against pebble pathways and the occasional gardener desperately trying not to sneeze. You might assume this was her day off, but no, this stillness is strategic. Cixi was known for her ability to manipulate court atmosphere with silence as effectively as any decree. One scholar believes her quiet Sundays were intended to subtly shift the palace rhythm, like recalibrating a clock by letting it run naturally for a few hours. Others suggest she was just tired of being looked at. Honestly, fair. By late morning, a shift, an audience with a visiting governor means she can't exactly greet him in ghost chic. So, the second outfit appears, a seafoam green robe, one of the few with horizontal motifs, clouds trailing along the hem like lazy thoughts. Horizontal patterns were uncommon, as vertical lines were seen as more commanding. But today's robe says, I am at peace, but still very much in charge. The most curious part of this ensemble is the sash. Unlike her usual gold or red silk cords, this one is made from finely braided strands of peacock feather filament. That's right, not the feathers themselves, but their filament cores, twisted so finely they shimmer in light like threads of rain. The sash appears gray from afar, but up close, it flares into green, gold, and blue like a moody opal. The fringe hangs down in a V shape, capped with 2 bells shaped like tiny gourds. You'd think they'd jingle, but somehow they don't. More of a whisper of metal than a proper sound. The palace attendants call them the Quiet Gourd Twins, which sounds like a folk tale, or possibly a very niche band. Lunch, mercifully, is a private affair, which means outfit 3 is one you almost miss. It's a buttery yellow robe, simple in cut, but bold in detail. The fabric is embossed, not embroidered. A woven pattern of magnolias and camellias that rise from the silk like shallow shadows. She wears it while sipping bird's nest soup, pausing occasionally to listen to the court musicians practicing nearby. One plays a guccine badly. Her left eyebrow does the tiniest of twitches. You make a mental note. That musician is probably switching careers by next week. Post-lunch brings something rare. Cixi opens her private gallery of heirlooms, showing select guests just 3 women from the nobility, a few pieces from her personal collection. For this, she dons what attendants call her collector's robe. It's navy blue, edged with a stripe of antique gold. The cuffs are wide, stiffened with inner panels of bone-colored silk and covered in delicate brushwork-style embroidery. Cranes, peaches, and pine trees, symbols of long life and wise stewardship. One long-debated mystery is the pair of shoes she wears with this robe. Unlike her usual platform slippers, today's pair are flat and soft-soled, made of layered felt and covered with floral brocade in faded pink. Some historians believe they were made during her time as a consort, before she ever dreamed of ruling. Others say they belonged to her sister and were kept for sentimental reasons. Either way, the shoes make no sound as she walks, which suits the reverent air of the gallery just fine. As sunset bleeds across the horizon, casting the Forbidden City in rose and gold, Cixi's silhouette emerges in her final look for the day and the week. It's breathtaking. A royal purple robe layered with sheer black gauze, embroidered with celestial scenes. The Big Dipper near the shoulder, constellations cascading down one sleeve. The stars are stitched with metallic thread and tiny glass beads, which catch the candlelight and reflected in slow pulses, like breathing stars. Her hair is done high for this occasion, a nod to the old Manchu traditions of formal hair architecture. Two wide wings sweep out from either side of her head, held up with silver combs shaped like phoenix wings. Tucked into the top is a single plume of kingfisher feathers, an almost electric blue that practically hums in low light. Her jewelry tonight is ceremonial, a jade bracelet worn on each wrist, carved with lotus patterns and polished to a high gloss. On her right pinky, a gold nail guard curves upward like a miniature blade. It's a statement piece, sure, but also a throwback to the court's obsession with nail length as a sign of privilege. You don't do manual labor with claws like that. And the final accessory? A silk handkerchief, folded crisply and tucked into her sleeve, barely visible. It's said to be embroidered with her childhood name in tiny stitches. Whether she actually carried it or whether that's just palace legend, no one can say. But tonight, in that robe of stars and shadows, she radiates both empire and echo, like in a song that keeps playing in your head long after it ends. Night falls gently, as the entire sky itself bows to the Empress Dowager's bedtime routine. But, of course, Cixi doesn't just toss on a nightgown and call it a day. Oh no, her evening ritual is its own production, complete with silks, scented oils, and a gown more complex than your average wedding dress. The final garment of the 7-day epic isn't exactly an outfit in the traditional sense. It's a sleeping robe, yes, but it's been crafted like an imperial lullaby. You catch your breath when you first glimpse it laid out on the lacquered cedar platform beside her canopy bed. It's pale lavender, a color not often associated with courtwear due to its subtlety. But that's the point. Lavender was seen as quietly divine, just spiritual enough to honor the heavens without the theatrical overtones of gold. The robe is lined with rabbit fur at the collar and sleeves, though you almost wouldn't notice unless you touched it. The fabric? Woven satin from Suzhou, rumored to have taken 4 artisans 3 months to produce. The inside lining is a faint mint green, calming to the senses and said to cool the skin in summer. The stitching on the robe forms a pattern so faint, you only notice it in candlelight. Stylized waves and lotuses, as if the robe itself is a dream floating gently on the surface of sleep. Cixi doesn't sleep alone, of course. There's an entourage. Ladies in waiting manage incense. Guards patrol the corridors, and one poor soul is responsible for maintaining the humidity in her sleeping chambers via an elaborate system of clay pots and wet muslin. The room is quiet, but it's the kind of quiet that's been carefully managed. You suspect even the crickets have been trained to chirp in moderation. Before slipping into her nighttime robe, Cixi takes part in a cleansing ritual, what modern beauty influencers might call the ultimate skincare routine. It begins with rose water, applied with silk pads chilled on silver trays. Then an ointment of crushed pearl and ginseng massaged slowly into the skin. And finally, a thin film of beeswax mixed with chrysanthemum oil, which, according to palace lore, was her secret to looking immortal. Historians still argue whether her skincare ingredients were more medicinal or symbolic. Then, the piece de resistance, her sleeping cap. Yes, really. You weren't expecting a sleepy bonnet, were you? It's made from the same lavender silk as a robe, embroidered with twin dragons curled protectively at each temple. The inside is lined with soft cotton dyed and tea leaves, again for the calming scent. The cap ties loosely under the chin with a braid of silk cord. Not too tight, lest it crease the skin. Not too loose, lest it fall off and disturb her sleep. Now, the bed. This thing isn't a bed so much as a fortress of soft power. A canopy of translucent gauze hangs from a carved frame of red sandalwood. The posts themselves inlaid with mother-of-pearl and motifs of plum blossoms and cranes. The mattress is stuffed not with feathers or straw, but with layers of cotton wadding and silk floss. Firm, but somehow still cloud-like. The pillow is crescent-shaped, made of jade cord ceramic, believed to balance energy and posture. One court physician swore it realigned the spine. Another claimed it realigned your moral compass. Unclear if either worked. Even after she lies down, she isn't technically done. An attendant tucks her in using a process that resembles origami more than bedtime. The lavender robe is folded just so, the sash laid diagonally across her midsection like a sash on a very sleepy sashimi. Then the gauze curtains are drawn, not all the way, but just enough to let the moonlight filter in, if it's a waxing moon. If it's waning, they close it. Why? Don't ask. It's just one of those things that's been done for generations. Probably something about fortune or alignment or the moon being judgmental. You might wonder, at this point, whether Cixi ever actually sleeps or whether she just lies there listening to palace gossip telepathically. But those closest to her swore she did sleep, deeply, dreamlessly, and often murmuring to herself in Manchu, even though most of her court life was in Mandarin. Some said she dreamed of her early days in the garden compound, before power and politics consumed everything. Others claimed she spoke the names of fallen rivals. Again, you'll find no consensus. Here's a curious detail, though. Every seventh night, her sleeping robe will be changed halfway through, around midnight. Quietly, swiftly, like a ghostly costume change. The new robe? Always white, always unpatterned, always slightly warmer. Why? Some say it was to signal her ongoing connection to the spirit world. Others suggest it was just practical. Night got cold, after all. And that's what this whole week of outfits has taught you, really. For Cixi, clothing wasn't just adornment. It was diplomacy, identity, memory, myth. Each robe a paragraph in the autobiography she never officially wrote. Each sash, pin, and embroidered sleeve a carefully curated sentence. Whether she stood before envoys or sat quietly sipping plum tea, what she wore always said something. Even in sleep, even in silence, even in lavender gauze and rabbit fur. Cixi dressed like an empress. And now that you followed her through this week of ceremonial glamour, feline espionage, and celestial accessories, you realize how much of history is sewn not just in words or wars, but in seams and silk, tucked under pillows and hidden in hems. And while the world outside her palace roared with revolution and change, inside this quiet cocoon of lavender light, she turned down the covers on Empire, one outfit at a time. The final night draws its silk curtain, and in the hush of that cavernous chamber, with its candlelight flickering like soft whispers, you now find yourself marveling at something so simple yet so rich with meaning. Her slippers. Yes, slippers. You weren't expecting footwear to close out this parade of imperial pageantry, were you? But here they are, as crucial as any dragon stitch robe or phoenix pin diadem. Pale blue silk, soles padded with pressed cotton and lined with crushed lotus leaves. Slippers that don't make a sound on the lacquer floors, as though even her footsteps had to bow to the etiquette of sleep. They rest quietly beside her bed, their toes pointed neatly forward. According to the court's etiquette manual, they must face east. Not north, not south, east. Toward the rising sun. Toward renewal. It's a poetic flourish in a room full of them. Like placing a comma just right in the final line of a haiku. By now you've seen 7 days of transformation. Sunrise robes, thundercloud capes, golden courtwear that sparkled like a currency all its own. And here, in her final moment of descent into sleep, Cixi wears none of it. Only her lavender robe and those paper-soft slippers wait silently in the wings, reminders that the Empress was still, under the embroidery and empire, a person, a woman with skin to protect, hair to untangle, and dreams that neither ministers nor messengers could decode. The room darkens, not all at once, but gradually, as if the furniture itself understands the shift. Incense threads twist into the air, soft as sighs. Sandalwood, this time, a scent you reserve for deep sleep. There's a low rustle as her ladies quietly exit, each bowing once before backing away, their slippers scuffing gently against the floor in synchrony. You imagine they practice the silence, the slow-motion choreography of reverence. Outside, the city of Beijing still hums. Somewhere far beyond these gilded walls, dumpling vendors pack up, poets linger over inkstones, and generals frown at maps. But here, the only map is one trace and embroidery thread, and lined with crushed lotus petals. You think back on everything you've seen, on her ceremonial robe thick with gold dragons and thunder motifs, her jade-toned gardenware, her rich red robe for diplomatic hosting, and that downright theatrical fur-trimmed cloak meant solely for palace strolls in December. Each day a new persona, each thread a code. Her wardrobe was not just fabric. It was fortress, theater, mask, and mirror. Historians still argue whether she curated this image as a strategy, or whether the grandeur simply grew around her like ivy on an ancient wall. Was she calculating? Or was she cornered by centuries of ceremonial expectation? Did she revel in this daily performance? Or was it a gilded routine she could never escape? You'll hear both sides argued in lecture halls and footnotes. But what's certain is this: she made it look effortless. And anything that looks effortless usually took an astonishing amount of effort. You think about her midday robe from the Spring Festival, embroidered with peonies and cranes, catching the wind like silk poetry. You remember the tiny hairpin shaped like a snow pea, half joke, half precious heirloom. You even recall the ceremonial headdress that could double as a helmet in a particularly glamorous battle. And now, here at the end, you hold all these memories together like a string of well-polished pearls. Each beat a moment, a sleeve, a whisper of satin along the corridor. Somewhere in the distance, a nightingale sings. Just one note, and that's when you realize this isn't about fashion. It never was. This is about how history is told through texture, shape, and silence. How a woman, hemmed in by 1,000 years of tradition, used robes as rebuttals, accessories as arguments, fabrics as footnotes. You let that idea settle as your own eyelids begin to droop. It's late now. The Empress has drifted into dreams, and so, perhaps, should you wandered long enough through a closet of wonders, tiptoed down echoing corridors padded with brocade. You've seen enough to know that in her world, a robe was never just a robe. Now it's your turn to slip beneath something soft. Something lavender, maybe, or just your old pajamas. Whatever fits. But before you do, remember this. Even in her most private hour, Empress Dowager Cixi wore her story. So tonight, sleep like royalty. Tuck yourself in like a state secret. And remember, the quietest moments often were the finest thread. Now, as the palace grows quieter still and the scent of sandalwood fades into memory, let your thoughts drift like embroidered clouds over silk mountains. There's no need to hold on to any more facts or names or dates. Just float gently now, with the echo of trailing robes and the soft shuffle of slippers against cool stone. You've wandered through 7 days of splendor, through robes thick with meaning and layers that whispered old secrets. You've watched an empress rise, receive retreat and rest, all without ever raising her voice. That's the thing about quiet power. It doesn't need to shout. It just is. Let the lavender silk slip across your imagination one last time. Let the hush of candlelight fill the space behind your eyes. You're safe here. Warm. Wrapped not in dragon-stitched garments, but in calm, cool quiet. Each breath softens the day behind you. Each blink longer than the last. And now, perhaps the soft weight of your own blanket feels a bit like brocade. Not royal, but regal in its own way. After all, sleep is a kind of empire, too, ruled by stillness, guarded by dreams. Close your eyes. You've traveled far, without ever moving. You've dressed in history's silks, and now there's nothing left to do but rest. End of script. Sweet dreams.